what they're trying to portray Palestinian men as is that every Palestinian man is a terrorist, because they know in Gaza, and we all know, that the political wings or the armed resistance doesn't recruit women or children. So they find a way to say that every man is a terrorist. Even the children, the male children, they would say that those are terrorists in the making. And even in the news today, in the news of the Western media outlets, we say that like mostly children and women and children are being starved, but also men are being starved. That's the point. But this is how the West portrayed us. And unfortunately, the Western audiences and the Western people took that, and they would never talk about men as being sufferers of this genocide, of this Holocaust. What I'm trying to say is that Israel is the sole problem here. If Israel doesn't exist as a colonial, for me it's a terrorist project that has been unleashing a Holocaust in Gaza for the past 2 years, and that has been torturing Palestinians inside Gaza and in the West Bank and across Palestine, occupied Palestine, for many, many years, for the last 75 years and more. If they were not here in the first place, all what we are talking about wouldn't be here. So this is what we need to focus on.
Welcome to Falasteeniya. Today we're joined by Abubaker, a Palestinian journalist from Gaza, who has been documenting from inside Gaza for the last 18 months. 4 months ago, Abubaker left Gaza as one of the few journalists who were able to leave Gaza within the genocide, in a time where Israel is deliberately targeting journalists. Since the beginning of the Israeli genocide over Gaza, since October 2023, Israel have murdered more than 238 journalists. And this number is very huge, to the level that the Watson Institution Cost of War project have said that this is the deadliest murder of journalists that they have ever documented. The number of journalists killed in Gaza in less than 2 years is more than those killed in the US Civil War, in the World War I, in World War II, in Yugoslavia War, Korean War, Vietnam War, Cambodia War, Afghanistan War, and Ukraine War. So today we're talking about dehumanization of Palestinians and dehumanization of men, specifically in Gaza and Palestine. So Abubaker, could you tell us more about yourself? Who are you? How was your life before the beginning of the genocide? And what changes happened after the beginning of the genocide?
First, thanks for having me. Before October the 7th, life has always been miserable in Gaza, even before October the 7th, and people were suffering from a lot of things, including the unemployment, and including the different and various escalations alongside the different wars that happened. Because before October the 7th, there were 4 wars that really occurred in Gaza, in which more than 4,500 people have been killed, including more than 1,500 children. So life in Gaza before October the 7th, for many people across the globe, for many people inside the territory, it was always miserable, and people couldn't even find a proper dwelling to sit in, to live in, and a lot of people could not even provide themselves with everyday meal. And people were working every single day for many hours, but unfortunately couldn't even find a way to live under the ongoing blockade that has been imposed not 3 months ago, not during this genocide, but since 2006. So for more than 20 years, Gaza, since 2006, has been under this very crippling and stifling siege that has caused numerous deaths inside Gaza. When I talk about this, I talk about the different number of people, the huge number of people who died in Gaza because they were denied entry, denied exit outside Gaza to receive medical treatment for their cancer. And a lot of other people, students particularly, they were denied a permit to travel outside to continue their education, to pursue their dreams. And at the same time, a lot of the businessmen and businesswomen as well, they were also restricted by Israel to move outside and broker some deals that would really improve the situation in Gaza. So Israel was always controlling the number of calories in Gaza. It was just always decided the food items that should have been allowed in, the electronics, every other thing, the building materials as well. So that's why Gaza has always been suffering, not since October the 7th, but before that. But I understand the point right now, and I can tell you that I share this feeling as well, that a lot of people in Gaza say that we miss Gaza before October the 7th, because people had something to enjoy. Even it was better, and it was kind of not the best, and now they have nothing. They've lost everything. So they wish they could have that thing that they were kind of not complaining about, but that kind of thing that they once had, better than nothing, which is happening at the moment. So for me, the same, because I'm a younger student. I was a student. My education was interrupted because of the genocide. I should have graduated in 2024, but the genocide interrupted my education. My university was reduced to rubble. The same that happened. I was obsessed with sports, with football in particular. I was doing football reporting and football commentating. That's what I was doing. And something I wish I could do the way I really wanted. And that's my dream, essentially. But unfortunately, the genocide broke out, and then everything had to change. And I knew at that point, when the genocide began, that I have a voice. I know how to address the Western audiences, in particular the English-speaking audiences. So I just had to pick up my pencil, my pen, and utter the words to defend my home.
Thank you so much, and that's very important. Since the beginning of the genocide, or even way before, since the establishing of Israel, and even before, Israel have been always dehumanizing the Palestinians. But on another layer, Palestinian men have been way more dehumanized. So I remember at the beginning of this genocide, and even before, people were saying, when looking at men kissing their daughters, or saying goodbye for them, or grieving for grandchildren, or even for their wives, people were shocked that our men have feelings. They can cry, they can care, they can love. Because this is not the stereotypic image that they were raised on or they were aware of. So, what do you think about this dehumanization, and why is it used against the Palestinians? How is it helpful for Israel to dehumanize us?
Because, well, what they're trying to portray Palestinian men as is that every Palestinian man is a terrorist, because they know in Gaza, and we all know, that the political wings or the armed resistance doesn't recruit women or children. So they find it a way to say that every man is a terrorist. Even the children, the male children, they would say that those are terrorists in the making. We've seen that, and even in the news today, in the news of the Western media outlets, we say that mostly children and women and children are being starved, but also men are being starved. That's the point. But this is how the West portrayed us. And unfortunately, the Western audiences and the Western people took that, and they would never talk about men as being sufferers of this genocide, of this Holocaust, and that would go for Israel as an excuse or as a pretext to bomb everywhere where men go. And that's what we've seen over the past 2 years, almost 2 years, that we're seeing two men carrying a tent inside the street, walking unarmed, peacefully, they have been displaced, and then an Israeli drone would attack them, would bomb them in the street. But it even reached a level way worse than that, when we saw the little girl's child, who was killed and bombed by an Israeli drone, carrying a gallon of water. That is the barbarism of Israel. But the dehumanization of Palestinian men hasn't been, as you said, has been for so long, for literally so long, because that's how they want to find excuses to bomb and annihilate a society. And of course, in Gaza, men constitute a huge part of the society. So if we can, as they say, eliminate or murder as many men as we can, then we have an orphaned child, we have a widowed woman, and that we can, by that, destroy entire families. And by destroying more families through killing men, then you have that kind of annihilation process that Israel has been seeking out for many years. But Israel wouldn't have done this without the help of Western media outlets, or without the help of the politicians. Because when we are looking right now at the statements, and I say the lukewarm statements that are being uh, produced or said by the Western politicians and the European politicians, they say that like suffering in Gaza has reached unimaginable levels. Children and women are suffering. So there's no mention of women. So they take what Israel says as men are terrorists in Gaza. They're all Hamas. There's no way. That's how they think it, because Israel kind of enforces this narrative into their minds, and that's the meaning of occupation. That those Western politicians, they're physically free, but mentally they're occupied. They just say what Israel wants from them, what the Western Empire wants from them, what the US British Empire wants from them. So they're kneeling to the empire. And that for me is the opposite meaning of freedom, of dignity. They have no dignity, they have no freedom, and they are just being robotized by this empire to say what Israel wants them to say. And they are indeed, by their statements, they're not helping us, but they are kind of finding an excuse and reason for Israel to kill men and to obliterate an entire society of 2 million people who haven't been suffering since October the 7th, but for many, many, many years. So this narrative and this kind of agenda that has, unfortunately, that has been instilled into the hearts of Gaza, into the heart of Gaza, has been taken worldwide. And that's what's causing us the suffering at the moment, and the agony, and the relentless grief.
That's true. They have been doing a very hard job making Palestinian men not seen, making Palestinian men silenced, and also seen as terrorists, as you have described. And this is part of something they've done. In 2009, a US-based Israeli lobby group called the Israeli Project have released a global language dictionary, which is described as a guide for leaders on the front line of fighting the media war for Israel. And in that, they said, and I quote from chapter 4, that was pushing Hamas as fundamental to any discussion on Palestine. And I quote from them: "You must isolate Hamas as a critical cause of the delay in achieving a two-state solution, the biggest source of harm to Palestinian people, and the reason why Israel must defend its people from living in terror." So this is what was written in 2009, not new. And for sure, they have been using that narrative and implementing it way before than the book was written. So why do you think, what does that tell us?
But they just want an excuse, as I told you, and they want anything to take to do whatever they want inside Gaza. And that's unfortunately what they have been successful in. What I'm trying to say is that Israel is the sole problem here. If Israel doesn't exist as a colonial, for me, it's a terrorist project that has been unleashing a Holocaust in Gaza for the past 2 years, and that has been torturing Palestinians inside Gaza and in the West Bank and across Palestine, occupied Palestine, for many, many years, for the last 75 years and more. If if they were not here in the first place, all what we are talking about wouldn't be here. So this is what we need to focus on. That's the truth that people are deliberately turning a blind eye to. And they're trying to take us, embroil us into their own zone, because in the West Bank, Hamas is not there. More settlements we have, more and more settlements, more people are being detained, more farmers are being shut down, and we've seen that recently. And more people, more children are being oppressed and subjugated and suffocated. The number of settlements that has been built since October the 7th is now way bigger before October the 7th, although there's not a single Hamas member in the West Bank, okay? And another point, because we've seen the Hamas protests in Israel has regurgitated this propaganda over the past years for the Western audiences who have taken this propaganda for granted and have believed it. We've seen a number of protests in Gaza that were against Hamas. What have they done for those people? Have they provided them with sanctuary? No. Have they improved their own situation? No. But I know some of them, some of those who have protested against Hamas, and we can't blame anyone in Gaza. Everyone in Gaza has a right to say whatever they want. But although they did this to satisfy Israel's claims, nothing happened, but some of them whom I know have been killed by Israel. So Israel does just say it's Hamas, but Israel, what it wants is clear. We want Gaza to be occupied, and that's what they are going ahead with. Even the Palestinian Authority at the moment, which we know helps Israel in detaining Palestinians and in killing them and in even finding their places, and they have kind of submitted to Israel's demands, what have they done? They haven't done anything.
Yeah.
Literally nothing has been achieved, but just more settlements, more subjugation, more suffocation, and more restrictions in demolishing of houses. Last time we saw the video in one of the Palestinian homes in the occupied Palestinian territories of a man being forced to destroy his own house, which was built like after many years, after tens of years of work and everything and exhaustion and everything. This is not psychological terrorism, and they've totally ignored this case, this story, when it comes to Palestinian hostages, the Palestinian men who are detained. Now they're a bunch of murderers, and Israeli officials, when they go on social media or when they are platformed, because they are consistently platformed by Western media, what they say is basically that these Palestinian men, who many of them, they haven't taken, like they have been detained from inside Gaza without any charges, without any trials. And one of them told me one time that he was just with his family. He separated, the Israeli soldiers separated the family. He took the man, detained him, and then left the family alone. So it's been deliberate. That has been deliberate to dehumanize Palestinian men. And whatever suffering we've seen or we will see in the next days, hopefully it will end towards those Palestinian men, there will be no coverage of it. Just focus on the children, focus on the women, ignore the men. But if an Israeli man is tortured or whatever, then the Western media will rage and rant, and that can tell you the level of supremacism, white supremacism, and racism those Westerners have had for many, many years, but we have been fooled by that.
That's true. And in the Western media, they always talk about Israeli soldiers who have been either killed or like came from Gaza, calling them teenagers. But when it comes for like Palestinian boys or girls, the children, they call them women, ladies, or men.
Minors, yeah.
So it's just like a play between them and Israel to dehumanize Palestinian, specifically Palestinian men. But also when we're talking about the creating of a scene that Israel is always doing, we remember 2 weeks ago when Israel have bombarded Shifa Hospital, bombarded not just a hospital, but a journalist tent where 6 journalists were doing their work. And they killed the 6 journalists, Jazeera crew, Anas al-Sharif and his colleagues, Mohamed Qreqa, Ibrahim Zahir, Mohamed Nofal, Musab al-Sharif, and also Mohamed al-Khaldi. So this is all part of this, like creating the scene with killing journalists and others. Have you ever met Anas Sharif or any of his colleagues?
I haven't met Anas al-Sharif, but I just want to say this, and probably I haven't even talked about it before, but I know Mohamed al-Khaldi, one of those who were killed, who was killed in this airstrike. And I've sat with him multiple times during the genocide. He was working alongside me at Al-Aqsa Hospital because he was in Dar al-Balah during the genocide before the ceasefire, but then he had to relocate when the ceasefire was implemented. Mohamed al-Khaldi told me when I was sitting with him that he was interrogated by Hamas. Okay? And then Israel said that this is a terror cell, it's a Hamas cell. So just tell me, someone who's been interrogated by Hamas, someone who literally doesn't have anything to do with Hamas. Why did he hit him? Any war crimes committed against Palestinians, that's not a war crime. Okay, that could be a mistake or an error, as Israel claims, and they would take this. And that we oblige Israel, or we ask Israel, we demand from Israel to investigate itself, to do a further investigation. That kind of narrative that has been going on for many years, that's the thing that we have and that we need to challenge and that we need to eradicate, because other than that, this will go on. So if Anas Sharif had any political affiliation, and by the way, he had a photo with Yahya Sinwar, okay, the leader of Hamas, and that photo was used to murder him. The same happened with Hassan Slayah, the famous renowned journalist, and they murdered him because it's like a part of the Geneva Convention is that those, even if they are fighters, okay, even if they are soldiers, if they are wounded or receiving treatment, you have no authority, you have no right to bomb them. They bombed him first time and they murdered him inside the hospital ward. That's how far Israel has gone. So when it comes to Anas Sharif, give me one photo of him holding a gun. He never held a gun in his life. And even in one of his times, he was calling for a ceasefire, and he was saying he was calling on the Hamas negotiating team to accept a ceasefire. He never shared a statement by Hamas as a Sharif or any of those with him. He never said what Hamas was saying over the past 2 years. He's a journalist. He had been working 24 hours a day. He had been posting on social media 24 hours a day. He was reporting relentlessly. He had been reporting. He never stopped. He literally never stopped. So when did he have the time to do secret terrorism? When did he have the time to join an armed resistance group to attack Israeli soldiers? When did he have the time? Or give me one post of Anas Sharif regurgitating what what Hamas has said, or even talked about it. Like, I was a journalist. Hamas never came to me and said to me what I did. I was there at the hospital. I reported it from every single part of this trip, from the north, from the south, from the middle area, from central Gaza. Never, not a single time did it happen when Hamas coming to me and telling me what to say. So all what Israel is saying is literally nonsense. Hamas or journalists in Gaza are working under duress, and the dehumanization of Palestinian journalists, that they are not trustworthy and they need honest, unfiltered reporting in Gaza, that is nonsense. Western journalists, they went to occupy Palestine when it was hit by the Iranian strikes, and they were literally parroting Israel's lies. Literally the same. They never talked about military infrastructure embedded between civilians. They never talked about Israel using their own people as human shields after the military's infrastructure that was seen clearly in the footage of the destruction inside occupied Palestine. And then they never talked about the military personnel in Israel, whether they are police or they're not police, because in Gaza, the equation is used, and it hasn't been appended that the police in Gaza are Hamas, because Hamas is the government. Of course, then the Likud party is the government, so everyone working in the Likud government, or the Likud party, including doctors, nurses, are legitimate targets, if we talk about this logic. So, but people will not talk about this. So it's a Hamas-run health ministry, but it's not a Likud-run health ministry. That's how they are depicting the situation in Gaza, which is really infuriating. So we're not going to judge people based on their political affiliations. This is the deliberate dehumanization of people. And that's why people in the West are living in humiliation, because they can't fight back against this mental occupation of capitalism, of individualism, and capitalism, because that's how they want people. They want them to get distracted, to work every single day. And that's what I've witnessed. That's what I've observed over the past 4 months since I left Gaza, that people don't have the time to talk about their own feelings and what they believe in. And when you can't criticize someone, then you are simply occupied.
Why do you think the West is choosing to abide by the Israeli narrative? Why they're choosing to fall for the debate? You talked about Israeli bombarding of hospital, killing journalists inside. Both protected groups, they shouldn't be bombarded or killed at all, according to Geneva, international law, and all of that. But they were bombarded and killed. And the West chooses to fall into the debate of whether they are affiliated with Hamas or not, rather than condemning Israeli atrocious crimes and the war crimes they have been committing. So why do you think the West is choosing to fall into this trap?
Because Israel is a product of the empire, of the Western Empire, of the British US Empire. And everyone wants to serve this product. It's the heart of the empire. And this empire, which is compromised by, or which is made up of, which constitutes different parties in different countries like the US and in Britain, they know if Israel is dismantled, then this empire would be dismantled. So they're trying to support it with every way they can. And they are controlling these cheap sellouts from politicians and journalists and media workers in the West to regurgitate what they want them to say. Or they threaten them. So they threaten them that their wishes could be docked. They threaten them that their lives would be ended, would be arrested, whatever. And people are ready to sell their humanity for a few euros, for a few pounds. That's for them nothing. So this is how, consequently, this is how people think of it, that Israel is the heart of the empire. And everyone has to know that Israel is the heart of the empire, of the specifically the Britain-US Empire, and that if this empire is dismantled and Palestine is free, then those empires will collapse. And that's what is making them afraid. That's why they have been the staunchest allies of Israel, supporting them financially, militarily, and in every way possible to dismantle a group of fighters who didn't exceed 40,000 fighters. You've been fighting them. You've been using the most developed and modern weaponry in the world, from bombs, quadcopters, warplanes, tanks, and everything, guns and machinery, whatever, and you haven't achieved anything militarily because you simply cannot beat the indigenous people to the land. You simply cannot destroy the belief inside people. If you want to annihilate a society, you have to obliterate their beliefs, you have to obliterate their creed, but you can't do that. Everyone believes in this way in Gaza, that our land must be free, must be liberated. That's the mentality. That's their mentality. So you need to change the mentality in whatever you want to achieve, but that's not going to happen. 100% is not going to happen. So the reason behind why everyone is following Israel is because simply Israel is the product of the empire, is the heart of the empire. If it is dismantled, then this empire will collapse, and that's what they are afraid of. And those politicians, leaders, whatever, will absolutely vanish, literally vanish. So their enemy, their heart is Israel, and their enemy is free Palestine. So they will never humanize any Palestinians, whatever it takes. And even, as I said, in their statement, in their lukewarm statements, you will never see anything that would be a goodwill gesture. Never, ever. That will never happen. And they all agree. You would see the Labour and the Conservative conflicting, having a clashing with each other here. You would see the Republican Democratic Party having a clash together, but you would never see them having a clash over supporting Israel.
Yeah.
That can tell you the story. The whole story is simple, that Israel is the heart of empire. Israel can control everything. Israel is controlling the White House, the Oval Office, the Parliamentary House here in the UK, and that's how it goes. The empire shouldn't fall. It must support Israel. It's our heart in the Middle East. It's our heart of terror. 100% they believe it's terror, but they don't want to say it because of what they have been doing for many, many years, especially since the genocide started. So they will never back down from supporting Israel. They will keep supporting it.
This argument and this idea takes us to the same thing that you mentioned already, that the Western people are already occupied mentally by those Israeli narratives, by the Western narratives of and controlling them, and not leaving them any space to critically thinking of anything that's happening around them, because they're so busy with their work and all of that. And that reminds us with the new political party that's getting established here in the UK. It's called Your Party, and it's being led by Zara Sultana and also Jeremy Corbyn. Zara Sultana have recently tweeted saying, and I quote, "The smears won't work this time. I say it loudly and proudly. I'm anti-Zionist." So this might be a shift for the political sphere here in the UK. Zara have already said her opinion, but Jeremy Corbyn didn't say it yet. So do you think it's important for Jeremy Corbyn to stand also as anti-Zionist, and also for their party, the new party, to stand openly and say that they are anti-Zionist and anti-genocide for Palestinians, but also for everyone else?
Well, I've known Zara Sultan and Jeremy Corbyn. I've known them during the genocide, of course. But the kind of argument that you're bringing up here is that where they stand, well, both of them have been extraordinary in support of Palestine over the past almost 2 years. And he has to, because anti-Zionism is a humanity. If you're an anti-Zionist, if you're not an anti-Zionist, then you're pro-apartheid, you're pro-genocide. It doesn't make any sense if you are, like, I'm not going to say I'm an anti-Zionist, but I'm against genocide. It doesn't make any sense. When you are on a stance, then you'll have to bring everything that supports this stance. But you cannot just say, like I'm against the genocide of Palestinians, but I can't say I'm an anti-Zionist. So it's very fundamentally, monumentally fundamental for him to say this loudly and proudly, as Zara said, of course. But also I urged him, because I haven't seen this from them over the course of the past 2 years. They haven't said anything about the resistance, and because I'm sure they understand the laws, they know the international laws, and like armed resistance is a legitimate right enshrined into the international laws. If they believe in a demilitarized Palestinian state, and they're calling for a two-state solution because they believe that Palestine should be demilitarized, but Israel should be militarized, then that doesn't make any sense for me, and their sympathy and their stances are just mere facades, to be honest. But what they have to focus on is being clearly, obviously, and without any kind of filtered language, they're anti-Zionists, they're against Zionism, because Zionism is the concept of the word. The Holocaust that is being perpetrated in Gaza is being perpetrated by the Zionist. And the final point here is that if you're not anti-Zionist, then you're not anti-Nazi. So if they were born, or if they left the Holocaust of the Jews by the Nazis, I think, the question would be, would they be reluctant to say they were or they are anti-Nazi?
Could you explain more what is anti-Zionism for you as a Palestinian journalist, a youth from inside Gaza? What does it mean, and how is it related to anti-Zionism?
Palestine had always a place for Jews to live in. Palestine has synagogues for Jews. We never had a problem with the Jews themselves. They have our utmost respect. They can live freely. The problem, the dilemma here is about Zionism and Zionists, and this belief that has been created recently by the Zionist terrorist groups and fascist groups. It is the movement that has caused and wrought all this destruction and wreaked all this havoc in Gaza and in the West Bank and across occupied Palestine for the past years. So anti-Zionism means to be against the genocide, against the blockade, against apartheid, against all these names, ethnic cleansing and the expulsion of Palestinians, and all these genocidal ideas that have been circulated around by Israeli officials, and no one has been challenging them, no one has been even condemning their words. But if a Palestinian leader, imagine a Palestinian leader opening up on genocidal rhetoric against Jews, saying that all Jews must be exterminated, that would be the news story everywhere, on the top of every headline, the headline of every newspaper. But because an Israeli official like Ben Gvir and Smotrich has been saying this, no one, and they have been even reiterating that for many times during the past weeks and during the past months, but no one has ever condemned them. And even when the UK tried to prevent those officials from coming to the UK and put sanctions on them, then the US and Rubio said that this is a wrong decision and we condemn the British government to do so. So imagine the level of fascism the US is under at the moment. It's turned into a fascist, sadistic country where people cannot even have the least of the amendments that the US has put for them. They cannot have free speech, they cannot have any free rights at all. So the point about Zionism here that we need to understand as a result of what we've been talking about is you must be anti-genocide, against the apartheid, against the ethnic cleansing, against the suffering and the blockade, and at the same time you must be with freeing someone's homeland which has been stolen for the past more than 80 years, and you are with them returning to their own rights. If you have these all, then you are an anti-Zionist. And anti-Zionism is a humanity, is believing that the indigenous people and the rightful owners of a specific land, that they have the full right and authority to get back to their own land and live freely there, enjoying their own lives as any other human being across the globe. So that is what we need from people. This is the definition of anti-Zionism.
Thank you so much. Abubakar, you recently published that the BBC have contacted you for an interview, and you had a very strong stance over that, and you published saying and accusing the BBC of being, and I quote, a mouthpiece of Zionism with oceans of the blood of my people in its hands. So what made you take this position against them?
I've taken it for a long time, to be honest, Hala. I've taken it for a long time. And I can tell you, because I appeared in the BBC in the early days of the genocide, because I believed that I could change something within the teams themselves. And I can tell you from here, the producers and the journalists that I was talking to, they know what they're doing is wrong, but they are afraid. They're occupied. We go back to the same point. We are occupied. And we cannot shrug off this reality of people being afraid of speaking up against their own governments and the media organizations where they work. And you cannot tell me they're helpless, because if they haven't been servile and haven't kneeled down, even if it is one. We have Sinkita, who has already resigned from the LBC after challenging, or has been fired after challenging an Israeli official live on air. And that was for LBC very anti-Semitic, and that's why they fired her. But she has been very still on her stance, and she's been supportive of Palestine. She's been attacking the Israelis for what they have perpetrated inside Gaza. Now, for the other journalists and producers who have no justification of their silence inside their media organizations, that includes Clarissa Ward in the CNN, that includes many journalists in the BBC, and for the BBC, they would say, not publicly, but between them, privately, they would say, look, we are against what the BBC is doing. And I remember one time I had a call with one of the BBC producers, and they told me, you're right on everything. And I said, you're a mouthpiece for Zionism, you are justifying the Holocaust of our people, you're justifying the killing. And she said literally to me, you are right. So after trying to change them, nothing has paid off. They are controlled by Zionists 100%. And the reason why I said this, because I wanted them to feel it. What's the point of me going live on the BBC, talking to a bunch of people have been giving consent for the Israelis to genocide on my people? What's the reason? What am I going to get? What am I going to get when I do an interview with a bunch of so-called journalists who have given the Israelis the consent and justified the killing of the children and the murder, the mass murder, dismemberment, and disfiguring of Palestinian children, women, and even the wiping out and the erasure of entire communities inside Gaza? This, for me, is unforgettable. And that's why I said to them that I'll raise a case against you, and I will continue doing this until I make sure those people are tried at a place where they will pay for the crimes they have committed. Because for me, they are an accomplice to the genocide, to the Holocaust, and they have a big role in what has been happening and transpiring in Gaza. And if we have a just law, because what they have done, we have a literary term called catachresis, which means the misuse of the language. And they haven't misused the language, but they have been deliberately misusing the language just to serve the interest of their politicians and of their bosses, and just to dismantle and annihilate a society of more than 1 million children. Therefore, why should I talk to them? These are the only time I should talk to them must be in a court where they are held accountable. Other than that, they are trying, by inviting me and other Palestinians, to wash their hands of their complicity. They are attempting to tell people, look, we are now platforming Palestinians and we are against the genocide or whatever. But even though the Israeli human rights associations have declared it's a genocide being committed under their name, and even though all humanitarian organizations have shared the same feeling and the same statements, the BBC and the media outlets, you would see them, it's a war in Gaza. And even worse than that, RTE, which is an Irish media outlet, an Ireland says it's a genocide, the Irish government says it's a genocide. Although all this is in Ireland, RTE says it's an Israel-Hamas war. That would tell you, using these terms and using these phrases is lethal. It's literally lethal. And this propaganda, believe me, has killed thousands of people in Gaza. And if Western journalists had done their job the way any human journalist with an atom of moral clarity and humanity, this genocide would have been ended a long, long, long time ago. So the blood of my people is on their hands and they must pay for it. That's why a case against them must be raised, and we will never rest until they're held accountable for what they have done to my people.
Thank you. That reminds me of something the Western media is always saying. They always say that we don't know the truth inside Gaza, or what's actually happening, or we can't verify anything because we don't have international journalists inside. It's not just part of the dehumanization, but it's also what you've just described. They are part of the propaganda of the genocide. So why do you think before the murder of Anas, few days before, Netanyahu have said that they will let international journalists into Gaza? Then they killed this 6 journalists in one attack. Why do you think they are doing that while at the same time advertising for getting international journalists inside Gaza?
Because you mentioned that the truth is not obvious for Western media outlets. I just want to comment on this, to elaborate on this a bit more. The first thing that we have to remind people is that the thing or the story inside Gaza is not bureaucratic, and the intricacies of it are very simple, which is that we don't even say what we've seen. A lot of the content that has been emerging outside Gaza, from inside Gaza, it has been filmed. There is nothing, it's live. It's a live stream genocide that has been well documented for the last 22 months. So what are you talking about? What do you want to verify? It's a video that you can see. It has no edits. We don't edit anything. We just put the video of the murder of children, women and men, and of the wiping out of entire families in front of you and the bombing of hospitals. We don't edit anything. Literally, we give you the footage as we've seen it on the ground. And that's what we have been doing inside Gaza. So what do you want to verify? And the other thing, being objective, there's nothing called objectivity when you see dismembered, disempowered, and disfigured children in front of your eyes. If these so-called journalists get into Gaza and have a bit of time inside the wards of any hospital inside Gaza, they would have trauma they will never recover from. And they would say, and you can see that, and the proof to what I'm saying is, see Dr. Victoria Rose, the British doctor, see Nick Mignard, the British doctor, and see what they tell you. They tell you that we can't even imagine the level of suffering inside the hospitals and the number of children wounded and amputated. Consequently, what do they want to verify? If the Western foreign people have got into Gaza, who are from their own people, and have literally had the same witnesses to people of compared with to people in Gaza, then what are they going to verify? I can't understand it. Unedited, unfiltered footage. It's live streamed. It's live streamed. This is the first. And many times it happened with journalists, including me, while we were reporting live an airstrike would happen nearby. And then we would see children mutilated and ambulances rushing into the hospital to transport casualties from the bombed out scenes. The other thing is that we are saying what we are living through. Why should it, like, do Palestinians, what is the neat thing about it? Like, a 1-year-old brain could tell you this, that why any human being in the world would go on or would go on live, like in any interview live, could go live to say that they are suffering. Does any human being in the world love to be suffering, love to be deprived of food and basic rights, love to be bombed? Why should we say that? We should say that. It's like, if we live happily, then we live happily. Why should we be like complaining, as they say, about anything? Why should we are saying that we're groaning from the pain? We should say anything. So it's a simple equation. You have unedited, unfiltered footage. You have our voices, the Palestinian voices. Many of those are not journalists. They are just witnesses in the genocide. They have nothing. They're children, most of them. And the third thing is that you have your own people whom you've sent into Gaza, and they have come up literally with the same feelings and sensations that Palestinians do have, but they don't want to believe any. And the idea that Israel is now advertising journalists, foreign journalists, to get into Gaza because they have done everything. They've done everything. So now, after we've done everything, that's what Israel is saying at the moment. After we've done everything, you want to get in, get in. We don't care. Because they were afraid, they were kind of afraid that those Western journalists, maybe one of them would have conscience, would have some kind of morals to say what Israel was doing. And then that would cause some kind of pressure on Israel to stop annihilating and decimating Gaza's every kind of a human sector. And that's what Israel wanted. But believe me, even if now Western journalists get into Gaza, nothing would change. They would regurgitate the same lies. They would repeat Israel's propaganda, and nothing would literally change on the ground. And that happened in the Iran-Israel escalations, and that already had happened in the footage they took in Gaza from the airdrop airplanes, and they just said, "What? We don't know." I remember very well the Sky News correspondent in Rafah who was on an embedded journalism mission inside Rafah, and he said, "Look at this neighborhood, which is flattened to the ground. We actually don't know if this was militarily necessary or not." What should we expect from them? Absolutely nothing. As I'm telling you, everyone who has justified the ongoing Israeli Holocaust must be persecuted.
Last month, we've released a video of you criticizing Egyptian football player Mo Salah because of his silence over everything that's happening in Gaza. And since that time, he has spoken out specifically on after the Israeli killing of the Palestinian footballer Sulaiman Abed. What do you think about that? Is that enough that he spoke right now?
I think it's better than nothing, and he should continue. That's my opinion. And you could see the impact that Salah has made after this tweet. You're talking about one tweet that has reeled in over 112 million viewers, that has gained over 112 million views. And that has kind of pressured the UEFA to bring 2 Palestinian refugee children into the final of the UEFA Super Cup between Tottenham and Paris Saint-Germain, and even put a banner inside the stadium, "Save the children, stop killing them." I don't remember the banner exactly. So this is Salah's effect. So imagine if Salah had been speaking since this genocide started. Believe me, I'm not exaggerating, but that might have been enough to stop the genocide. But his silence, we cannot, like him posting at the moment, cannot justify and cannot give him an excuse to get away with over his silence over the past 2 years. It was disgraceful. It was unimaginable that he could do this, because look at the love he has inside Gaza. I remember walking Gaza streets during the genocide, and you would see a photo of Mohamed Salah hung up on one of the walls. You would see people, loads and loads of people wearing Salah's shirts, and Salah's shirts, new shirts and new jerseys are being sold in the markets and on the makeshift stores. So he has to know that he's very, very much loved in Gaza, but people are disappointed by him because he hasn't spoken up for them, and he could have changed. And I'm sure now he has realized that he could have changed a lot, and he has nothing to lose. He has achieved literally everything in the football world. He's one of the best three footballers across the globe. He has won every possible major trophy, whether individual or collective trophy. As a result, what he is, I'm just saying, like, what is he afraid of losing? He has nothing to lose, and he can speak up, and he can really play and take a very, very big role in stopping what is happening, I believe, and I hope he will continue.
I hope so too. Looking at the big picture of what's happening in Gaza now, the genocide and the total annihilation of people, and also Gaza as a strip, what do you think the Israeli master plan now for Gaza, and could it be stopped?
I believe, as I told you, after all the images and the footage and the videos we've been observing over the course of the past 1-2 months, I do want from people to stop their government's complicity and let Israel fight its own war. That's first. And I don't want people to believe in our right to self-defense and legitimate armed resistance. And that's the way how it can be stopped. We need a military intervention to stop it. And the Irish president, I forget his name, he's talked about it, that we need a military intervention to stop it, to stop the genocide, and to intervene to secure safe humanitarian corridors to truck aid into Gaza and to the needy people, to the very desperate people right now, because the scale, the full spectrum blockade has resulted in an unbelievable scale of deprivation and desperation. To solve that, you need a military intervention, because unfortunately, all the kind of political intervention, the mere facade and platitudes that we've seen haven't paid off, and that Israel, the only way to stop it is power. If governments believe in human beings, in humans' rights and basic rights, they should literally and unequivocally intervene militarily to help those in need and to save their own humanity by intervening militarily to stop Israel from starving an entire population, half of which are children who have nothing to do with animals, and many, many thousands of children. Those children have been born prior to the genocide, a few weeks or months prior to the genocide, and the rest have been during the genocide and have lived their lives during the genocide. Imagine a 3-year-old child, 2-year-old child. He's 2 years old, but he has lived it all during the genocide. That is, for me, inconceivable, insurmountable, impenetrable, something that I can't really put into words. But this is the failure of the internet, of the human world. There is no humanity in this world except for a few people who wanted, who dreamed to do something, but they're not allowed to do this thing because the governments are tyrannies. That's how it is. But a military intervention is needed now more than ever before, and that would pressure and stop Israel from continuing with its Holocaust.
Thank you so much, Abubaker, for being with us. And I hope that the people would listen to you and they will be able to push their governments
Literally,
to put
so.
an end for the genocide and also for the Israeli occupation. Because as long as the occupation continues, colonization continue, the genocides will be happening more and more.
Literally.
So thank you for being with us. You're a witness of the genocide. You're one of 2 million people in Gaza who have witnessed it. And it's very important to understand what you said, the dehumanization of men and also all the Israeli tactics to murder the Palestinians and get excuses out of that. So we can actually be able to mobilize and stand in action and solidarity with the Palestinians until Palestine is free. Thank you so much, Abubaker. Lovely meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was mine.
If you are enjoying this podcast, and if you enjoy listening to the Palestinian voices and to the voices that breathe the air of Palestine, please support Palestine Deep Dive at palestinedeepdive.com/support.